The year is 1492. Three ships leave the port of Palos de la Frontera in Spain, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, commanded by an Italian explorer named Christopher Columbus, sailing west into absolute nothingness, into uncharted ocean, into the unknown. He was looking for Asia. He never found it. But what he found instead changed the entire world forever. Now here is the question that should keep you up at night. What if he never made it? What if a storm swallowed those ships whole? What if the Spanish crown laughed him out of the room? What if Columbus turned those ships around and sailed back home? Two continents, hundreds of millions of people, thousands of years of history, all of it unfolding in a completely different direction. This is one of the biggest butterfly effects in all of human history. And we are about to tear it apart. Let's go. First, you need to understand something that most people get completely wrong. Columbus did not discover America. Not even close. People had been living there for at least 15,000 years before his ship showed up. 15,000 years. We are talking about tens of millions of people across hundreds of sophisticated civilizations that had been building, expanding, and thriving long before Europe even knew they existed. The Aztec Empire in Mexico was jaw-dropping. Their capital city, Tenochtitlan, was built on a lake, had functioning aqueducts, massive pyramids, bustling markets, and a population larger than any city in Europe at the time. Larger than London, larger than Paris. Built in the middle of a lake, the Inca Empire stretched across more territory than the Roman Empire at its peak. They built roads through mountains that engineers today still marvel at. They had no written language and still managed to administer one of the largest empires in human history. The Mississippi Valley had cities with populations in the tens of thousands. Sophisticated trade networks stretched across the entire continent. Columbus did not discover a new world. He crashed two worlds together that had been completely separate for thousands of years. And that collision was catastrophic. So what happens if that collision never occurs? Europe keeps pushing east. That is the immediate answer. The whole reason Columbus was sailing west in the first place was to find a faster trade route to Asia. Spices, silk, gold, all of it was flowing through Ottoman-controlled land routes, and it was bleeding European merchants dry. Spain desperately wanted a shortcut. Without Columbus, Spain keeps hunting for another way. Portugal was already making serious progress sailing around the southern tip of Africa. That route succeeds regardless. Vasco da Gama rounds the Cape of Good Hope in 1498, and suddenly Europe has direct access to Asian trade. The spice trade explodes. European powers get incredibly wealthy off Eastern commerce. But nobody is sailing west. Nobody accidentally stumbles onto two massive continents sitting right there in the Atlantic Ocean. Now here is where it gets really interesting. Columbus was probably not the only person who would have eventually found the Americas. The Vikings already beat him by 500 years. Leif Erikson landed in North America around 1000 AD. They just did not stick around. Without Columbus, it is entirely possible another European explorer makes the crossing eventually. The Portuguese were getting bolder every single year. The English were hungry for new trade routes. Someone probably gets there, but eventually could mean 50 years later, or 100, or 200. And that gap, that window of time, changes absolutely everything. So let's say no European contact with the Americas until the 1600s at the earliest. What does that world look like? The Aztec Empire keeps growing. Already one of the most powerful military and economic forces on the planet in 1492. Without Spanish conquistadors showing up with guns and disease, the Aztecs continue expanding across Mesoamerica. Their engineering advances, their trade networks grow, their military gets stronger. By the 1600s, you are potentially looking at an empire that dominates an entire continent. The Inca Empire in South America follows the same trajectory. No Francisco Pizarro showing up with a tiny army and somehow toppling an empire of millions. The Inca keep building, keep expanding, keep developing their civilization on their own terms. And here is the part that hits different when you really think about it. The single most devastating thing Columbus's arrival unleashed on the Americas was not guns. It was not warfare. It was disease. Indigenous populations had zero immunity to European illnesses like smallpox, measles, and influenza. Estimates suggest that within a century of European contact, up to 90% of the indigenous population of the Americas was wiped out. 90%. That is one of the largest population collapses in all of human history. Without European contact, that never happens. Tens of millions of people who died within decades of Columbus's arrival get to live, get to build, get to shape history. Now what about Europe itself? How does this change things on that side of the ocean? Massively. The discovery of the Americas pumped an almost incomprehensible amount of gold and silver into the Spanish economy. Spain became the most powerful empire on earth almost overnight because of American precious metals. That wealth funded wars, funded exploration, funded the entire Spanish Golden Age. Without American gold, Spain stays a mid-level European power. The balance of power in Europe looks completely different. Portugal, already dominating Eastern trade routes, probably becomes the dominant European superpower of the 1500s. England and France scramble for position, but without the massive influx of American wealth, nobody pulls so far ahead of the pack. The entire colonial era as we know it does not happen. No transatlantic slave trade. Let that sink in for a moment. The transatlantic slave trade, one of the greatest atrocities in human history, existed specifically to provide labor for European colonies in the Americas. No colonies in the Americas means no demand for that labor. The 12 million African people forcibly transported across the Atlantic in chains, that horror does not occur. The entire demographic makeup of the modern world changes completely. North America, South America, the Caribbean, all of it develops along entirely different lines. What about the United States? Does it exist? Almost certainly not in any form we would recognize. The United States was built on European colonization of North America. No colonization means no United States. The most powerful nation in modern history simply does not exist. The dominant powers of the 20th century, the entire Cold War, the space race, Hollywood, Silicon Valley, none of it happens the way we know it. The indigenous nations of North America continue developing their own political structures, their own trade networks, their own alliances and conflicts. By the 1800s, you might be looking at a North America dominated by powerful indigenous confederacies, with no European presence at all. The global balance of power in the modern era looks nothing like what we know. No American superpower means the 20th century plays out completely differently. World War I and World War II, if they happen at all, end very differently without American intervention. The entire modern world order gets rewritten from scratch. And Columbus himself? He dies in 1506 having never fully understood what he found. He went to his grave believing he had reached Asia. In our timeline, he is remembered as one of the most consequential figures in human history. In this alternate timeline, he is just another sailor who turned back, a footnote, a name nobody remembers. Here is what this what if really teaches us. The modern world, everything we know, every border on every map, every language spoken across 2 continents, the entire demographic reality of the Americas, all of it traces back to 3 small ships leaving a Spanish port on August 3, 1492. One voyage, one yes from the Spanish crown, one explorer stubborn enough to keep sailing west when every instinct said turn back. The butterfly effect does not get bigger than this. Think about that. If you made it this far in the video, make sure you like and subscribe. It helps out the channel a lot. See you guys in the next video.